Welcome back to the daily Living Jewish Kitzur Shulchan Aruch class. We are learning the laws of interest. And yesterday we discussed delayed payments, selling debts. Well, that we discussed more earlier last week, but most recently we discussed advanced payments. And we discussed that if you're not allowed to pay a person a discounted amount because you're paying in advance, unless he has the item available now for collection. But if this is, I guess, pre-ordering, what do they call it? So before he's able to go to print, let's say you want to buy a book, and the author says before they go to print, they need people to pay in advance at a reduced rate. So if you're getting the same item, you're getting the item at the same time as everybody else. You're getting the item in 2 months' time. And then the book will sell for 300 Rand a piece. But now he's letting you pay 200 Rand a piece, so he has the cash in advance. So then there's a problem of interest because the seller is paying you 100 Rand discount in order to hold onto your money before he's actually given you the book. But if he already has the book ready now, and it'll only be ready for the collection time will only be later, then it's fine, because then we could say that this is the going rate now because the product exists, and then the transaction happens now, and then it's not viewed as a loan, rather as an early transaction where the item will come later, as opposed to if the item doesn't yet exist or isn't yet ready or requires a lot of work, then we would say that the transaction hasn't happened yet, it's only going to happen later, and later the price will be higher. And so he's basically saying that although the transaction will happen later, you'll be able to pay less since you lent me money, since you gave it to me in advance. And that would be a problem. That was in summary. Let's move on to, then we spoke a lot about if somebody wants money in order to purchase an item in advance. So it all boils down to whether it is a joint business venture, in which case it's fine, it's not considered an interest loan, or if it's not a joint business venture, in which case it is considered paying interest for the loan. And what will determine that is who has responsibility if the merchandise gets ruined or lost. If the borrower will be exclusively responsible for the produce, so then it's not a joint venture because it's all on the borrower. In which case we'd say that there it's a loan, and then there's a concern of interest. But if the lender will take some of the responsibility of if the item gets lost or broken, then it's a joint business venture, and then it's not considered a loan, rather it's considered a business venture, in which case it would be acceptable for there to be costs on both sides. We're now talking about property. So you're allowed to increase the rental of real estate. How so? So if one rented a property to another, and the owner said to him, before the renter took possession, if you pay me the rent in advance, you can have it for 10 guldens per year. Okay, so if you want to pay me a year's rent upfront, then let's say you could pay 100,000 Rand, and that will be your annual rent. But if you want to pay me monthly, then you need to pay me 10,000 Rand a month. So it's going to cost you not 100,000 Rand per year, it's going to cost you 120,000 Rand per year. So you would think that maybe this is interest, because what you're saying is, let's say I'm the landlord and I'm renting out my cottage. So it could be argued that I'm saying to the tenants, if you pay me in advance the full sum upfront, then I'll give it to you for less. So what does that mean? It means that I, the landlord, am paying the tenant interest for having his money in advance. I'm saying, in return for you giving me the money in advance, I'm going to give you a reduced rate. But it's not a problem. Why is it not a problem? Because halachically, rent is not payable until the end of the rental period. Therefore, when he takes a gulden each month, which add up to 12 gulden, it's not compensation for awaiting payments, because there's no obligation to prepay. I wonder how this would work nowadays, that this certainly has changed, but at least the way it was set in the times of the Shulchan Aruch, because obviously once you have a contract, you have the right to stipulate it however you'd like. But the Shulchan Aruch speaks about how you would pay your rent at the end of the month. So what he's saying is that even when I'm paying each month, I'm not, sorry, let's flip it around. The way I explained it was the reverse. Really, it goes the other way around. What you might argue that I, the landlord, am charging interest to the tenant for paying me late. Because I'm saying to him, if you pay me the year's rent now, I'll charge you 100,000 rand. But if you only pay me later, then I'm going to charge you more. So it could be argued that I am making the tenant pay extra because he's paying me late. And the Shulchan Aruch says no, it's not a problem. Why? Because he's actually not paying me late. Because the money is only due when he actually is in there during his month. It's not due yet. So it's not that I'm charging him for paying me late. He's still paying on time. So saying if you pay me in advance, you can have it for 10 is considered a waiver of the two gulden. In return for his prepay before payment becomes due, and this is allowed. Why is it not considered interest the other way around? Why don't we say that now it's considered like the landlord is paying the tenant interest? Because the landlord is saying, since you're paying me in advance, I'm giving you a discount. That's not a problem. I have a lot of thoughts about this, but we're going to continue. Only where real estate rental is concerned is it permitted to increase payment in this manner because the property is acquired immediately. Here we go. This maybe answers the question. But to profit from the wages of a worker in this manner is not allowed. For example, if I hire somebody to do a job for me sometime in the future, and I pay him now before he begins the work. Okay, so let's say I want to add a bathroom to my house, and I call up a contractor, and the contractor says you can only do the work for me in January, and I tell him, you know what, I'm happy to already pay you now in November, even though you're only going to do the job in January. But then I want to pay you less. If I pay you 3 months before you do the job, will you give me a reduced rate for the job because I'm giving you advance payments? But what I don't realize is that I'm actually trying to pay him interest for a loan, charge him interest for a loan. Sorry, I'm actually charging him interest for the loan. Because if he's only doing the job in January and I'm asking him to give me a reduced rate because I'm paying him 3 months in advance, what I'm basically telling him to do is to pay me for borrowing my money, because he's not entitled to the money until January. So that would be a problem. Then the prepayment is like a loan. But if the worker began the job immediately, even though he will not complete the job for many days to come, then it is permitted to pay his wages in advance in return for his working more cheaply. Since he begins the work immediately, the money is considered as wages and not a loan. So it makes a lot of sense, right? If I say to the contractor, he says, look, I'm only going to be able to have the job finished by January. I could start now, but I'm only going to finish later. And then I say to him, okay, I'm willing to pay you now upfront, but I want you to give me a better quote. It's fine, because it's not considered like, by him giving me a better quote, it's not considered like he's paying me to have the money in advance as a loan, because it's not considered advance because he's starting to work now. So the moment he starts to work, then the transaction is already kicks in, and then it's not a loan in advance of the transaction. Okay, I hope you understand that. Seems makes sense to me. Could get a little complicated. I hope you're able to keep track. Okay. Now a different scenario. Okay. So now you have a dowry for a bride. So for example, so if I set aside a dowry for my daughter, and I agreed with my future son-in-law that for every year that my son-in-law lets me hold on to his dowry, I'll give him so much profit, then that's allowed. So again, my daughter's getting married, and I pledge to give to the young couple. Let's say I pledge to give them whatever it is, 50,000 Rand. And then I say to them, you know what? Although I've pledged to give you that 50,000 Rand as soon as you get married, if you don't mind me holding on to that 50,000 Rand for the first 6 months of your marriage and to only give it to you 6 months after you get married, then I'll give you more than 50,000 Rand. Then I'll give you 60,000 Rand. So is that considered like I am paying interest for borrowing their money? The answer is no, it's allowed. It's all it's considered is an increase in the dowry. It's as if I said to my son-in-law, I will give you a gift of so and so much at a certain time, and if I don't give it to you by that time, I'll give you more money. In other words, we can't say that it's considered like I'm paying interest for borrowing his money because it never became his. So, a different scenario. If I went and I gave my future son-in-law 50,000 Rand, and then I asked him, you know what? If you don't mind lending that money back to me, then I'll give you 60,000. So then that's an interest loan. I'm asking him, give me 50 and I'll give you back 60. But if I never gave him the 50 yet, and I'm giving him an option to either give him 50 now or 60 in 6 months, I'm not paying interest for a loan because I'm not borrowing money. It's all still mine. It's just a choice. Do you want 50 now or 60 later? So there's no problem with that. But this is all if it was agreed to upfront when they were writing Tanaim, the conditions. Tanaim is a document that speaks about who's going to pay for the wedding and different finances, and this is written up in advance of the wedding. So as long as it's written up in advance, so there's no obligation on me, I could give any amount. So then I could decide to commit to either 50 now or 60 later. However, if at the writing of the Tanaim, I committed myself unconditionally to 50 grand. And then when the wedding arrives, I've already written in the document that I will be giving 50 grand for the wedding. When the wedding arrives, I ask, you know what? I'd rather give you 60 later than 50 now. So since there's already been a financial commitment, so then now I'm taking back money that I've already knocked myself into. So then that means that I'm now taking a loan from the money I would be paying in order to give back more. That would be interest. That would be a problem.
Rabbi, can I ask something? In the unlikely event that you agreed to pay 50,000 when they got married, but they're only getting married in 6 months' time. So you say, I'll give you 50,000 in 6 months' time. Or alternatively, I can give you 45,000 now. That's not allowed, I assume.
Okay, it's a good point you're saying. If you've said you've committed yourself to 50 and you've put that in paper, but the commitment was for at the time of the wedding.
Correct.
And now you're saying, I'd rather than have to give you 50 later, I'd rather give you 45 now.
Yeah.
In advance. But then 1 second, this doesn't make sense.
No,
what you're basically saying to them is that you're lending them money. Oh no, it does make sense. You're lending them money, and therefore they're going to be paying you 5 grand to have the money in advance. right? So that probably wouldn't be allowed. Yes, I think logic would say that that wouldn't work
It would
either.
be very unlikely that that would happen, but it wouldn't be allowed.
No, it would be the other way around. It would be unlikely for the father-in-law to offer that.
Yes, yes.
But it would be likely, I mean, you're right, it's unlikely because it's a new marriage and they should be trying to develop good ties. It's not the best thing to do these financial ventures with your future father-in-law of all people. But if, for whatever reason, the son-in-law, future son-in-law came to his father-in-law and he said, you know what, I would already like the cash now because I would already want to start doing renovations for the future apartment. Can you maybe get now? I know I'm asking you for it before you were planning on giving it. So, but I'm willing to take it for less. So then that would be that he's now taking a loan. No, I don't know. I don't think it's a problem because it's not a loan. It's just getting the gift earlier upon reconsideration.
Yeah, but the quantum has changed.
Correct. But there's nothing wrong with me telling somebody I'll give them a larger gift later or a smaller gift now.
Yeah.
So I don't see it unless it was already financially locked in. But I think this way around wouldn't be a problem. Hear me out. I want to hear what you think. Okay. So no, on reconsideration. Yeah, I think maybe one would be able to say, I'm not sure what the answer is, that, look, my son-in-law comes and he says, you know, he wants to really get 45 grand now, 5 months before the wedding. So I say to him, okay, so I would be required to give 50 and now I'll only be required to give 45. So basically, he's paying me 5 grand in order to get the money in advance. So that would be interest. But you could look at it differently. You could say that the son-in-law could come to me and say, if you give me 45 now, then I will absolve you of your commitment to give me 50 in a few months' time. Maybe that would work.
Okay.
Maybe that would work because then it's not a loan. It's just a different gift. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't know definitively, but even though I've already committed myself to 50 and now he's asking for money in advance, but if he's asking us for a gift of 45 now instead of a gift of 50 later, although I've already committed myself to the 50, I see logic in the future son-in-law being able to say, let's cancel that gift and get this gift instead. And I think maybe that would not be interest. I think it might not be a problem. Okay, we'll conclude with that. Great question. Please, God, what's today? Today's Wednesday. Tomorrow, we'll discuss fascinating scenarios of interest between Jews and non-Jews. Because the prohibition of charging interest is only between Jews. From a Jew to a non-Jew, you have to be absolutely moral and honest in business. You can't take advantage of people, but the prohibition of interest does not apply. You're allowed to. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with paying interest or charging interest between a Jew and a non-Jew. It's a special prohibition amongst the Jewish people. But we're going to discuss when it's a mixture of Jews and non-Jews.